The sexual exploitation of children is an alarming and surprisingly large problem across the country and even right here in Massachusetts. Members of the law enforcement and medical communities came together to discuss how to help victims and prosecute those forcing them into prostitution. Connecting Point correspondent Carolee McGrath spoke with Hampden District Attorney Anthony Gulluni to find out about ongoing local efforts to combat the commercial sexual exploitation of children.
We have a victim rights conference every year which focuses on our work and law enforcement's work on the service to victims, which is of course very important and solemn work and important to me. This year we're focused on the commercial sexual exploitation of children, or CSEC for short, which is something we're realizing is a very significant problem, and it's a sad admission for us to understand that children are being sexually exploited. But it's a reality that we have to accept and work on to make a difference. And we have come together here in Western Massachusetts in the law enforcement and medical communities to work on this issue very seriously. So this conference is for medical professionals, professionals in law enforcement, and those who work with victims and witnesses in and around law enforcement. And we're focused on the awareness, the understanding of the issue, and how to work on it more effectively. So we have a full day program where we have experts in the field, where we have folks who can speak about the impact on victims, how to provide them with services, how to deal with their emotions and the sort of fallout of that sort of exploitation, and how to, from our perspective, how to more effectively investigate, arrest, and prosecute for police officers and other investigators, and we as prosecutors.
When you're talking about the commercial sexual exploitation, you're talking about prostitution, correct?
Essentially, yeah. It's sort of more complicated, where you have, in this case, children, but can be any age adults who are basically being pimped, who are being exploited sexually for another person's profit. We're fortunate to some extent that in the state of Massachusetts and at the federal government level there are strong laws on these issues, and we use those laws to effectively and aggressively prosecute those people who engage in this conduct. It is a problem. There are some estimates that upwards of 200,000 children are being sexually exploited every year in the United States of America, and it's certainly no exception here in Hampden County. Mm-hmm. So it's an issue I've taken on. It's an issue that my office is working on very diligently with its law enforcement partners, and it's a very serious issue. Certainly it strikes at a lot of people's hearts.
But set up the scenario for us. So is this like a girl who's in high school, who's dating somebody who then forces her to be a prostitute? I mean, how do these girls become victims, and who's preying on them?
It's any number of scenarios. That's certainly one, Carolee, but we're seeing situations in which young people are being trafficked to Hampden County. They're coming from other areas where they're more vulnerable, where they don't have family and friends to whom they can turn when in positions of need. We're seeing young people who are drug addicted to heroin. That is a means by which they're being exploited and manipulated by the pimp or the person exploiting. So it's often vulnerable young people, runaways, people from very difficult backgrounds, where they're getting in a situation where they're, in some cases, physically threatened, intimidated, and battered to keep them in this position for the profit of another. But we are seeing it with young people who are from different areas of the country coming in here, being trafficked. So these are very, very dire, serious situations. And it's really a major effort of my office and its law enforcement partners to counteract this and get ahead of this. And we realize that here, specifically in Springfield and Hampden County, the landscape is changing quite literally with a casino, and we're realizing that some of these problems are potentially going to be more prevalent. So we're educating ourselves in law enforcement, understanding the problem better, and knowing how to be essentially more effective investigators and prosecutors.
And how do you encourage these kids who, in many situations, you don't even know who they are, to come forward and to tell someone? That's got to be such a challenge for your office.
It's a huge challenge, especially when these young people, young women in many cases, are drug addicted or inured to this kind of conduct and treatment. But really it's about the paradigm changing, where we now in law enforcement understand that these young people are not prostitutes. They're not hookers. They're being, in many, many, many cases, the majority of the cases, they're victimized. Right. They are the victims of some sort of exploitation, of some sort of pimp who's exploiting them for financial gain. So we have to understand, as police officers, investigators, and prosecutors, how to treat them as such, how to treat them as victims, and provide them with the services that they need when they come forward. And when we're able to interact with them, that's clear to them that we're there to basically help, not to prosecute or jail them, that we're there to get them out of this situation and find the real perpetrator, the real criminal who's deserving of that treatment by cops and prosecutors.
Now, will you have, it looks like you're going to have a presentation from a survivor as well on Thursday, which has to be pretty powerful to hear.
I expect it will be. You know, I've had the chance to talk with people who have been in this situation, to current victims. Obviously, it's tremendously emotional. I think this is going to be a very impactful presentation by her. I think it's going to certainly hit home with the people there, and it's going to help motivate us to make sure that we understand this issue and do our best in law enforcement.
And what about teachers? Like, how can you, I guess, help teachers recognize any sort of warning signs that they might see in school?
Well, I think from sort of the higher levels, we have to be in partnership with school districts to let them know the proper reporting procedures when something like this is recognized within their school systems. And I think with individual teachers, many of whom I think will be in attendance at our conference, they need to understand this issue, understand what the warning signs are, understand the manifestations of a young woman or young man who is in a situation of exploitation, and be able to report that effectively so it makes it to law enforcement, and at which point we can step in.
So is a lot of this connected to gang activity as well?
In some cases, we're finding that organized crime, gangs, street gangs often are turning to this as a source of income, as a diversification of the work that they're doing. So we're focused with our law enforcement partners on understanding that and being able to sort of infiltrate the gang structure, and understanding that they're using this as a means of income. So it is a focus of ours and a focus of our law enforcement partners as well.
Thank you so much for joining us, for talking about this pretty scary topic that you're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you.